Hi everybody, welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the story that 7 News broke this week about the Arapahoe High School shooting. The story showed that the school did not report the December 2013 shooting to the Department of Education due to a loophole in Colorado's reporting law. Patty Calhoun from Westward, I understand that it was still by the books law-wise, but this seems like a pretty big loophole if you don't have to mention that there was a shooting that made international headlines to the Department of Education.
Yes, and I think anyone at Arapahoe High School, or really anywhere in Colorado who remembered the horrors of that shooting, would be a little surprised by this. The state has kind of stepped up and said it wasn't really so much the school's fault in the reporting, it is the loophole, but that is clearly a loophole that needs to be closed.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School, you are our resident legal expert. A design loophole or just a mistake when they wrote the law?
I actually haven't studied it, so I will say nothing on that subject. But I'd say in general, there is a big problem about school safety incident reporting, and this, for higher ed as well, where the schools, a college is very thorough and it reports everything, and then its competitors are pretty sloppy and they say, oh no, we haven't had any crime on campus in the last 6 years. And so the latter school ends up looking good in the statistics, and parents think, oh, that's a safe school for my kid. And the school that was honest ends up looking bad.
Eli Stokols, political reporter with Fox 31 and an anchor on KWGN. Your thoughts on this story?
I think as much, the disclaimer is that local TV investigations do tend to be a little bit alarmist. And I think using this shooting, we all know about the shooting, right? But the larger point is that there is this loophole, and for parents who are looking at these statistics, they need to at least know that these statistics only refer to cases in which discipline was imposed on the student. And I think they either will or they'll change the law. Lawmakers will address this next year probably, and it's probably an easy fix, and they will make it so that the laws are more explicit or tighter so that everything has to be reported regardless of whether there's discipline or not.
Susan Green, editor at ColoradoIndependent.com. Wrap it up for us.
First, I think it's refreshing to hear a TV guy say that TV is sometimes alarming. The incident itself was absolutely alarming. The loophole is kind of an administrative issue. There's no evidence that schools were intentionally covering things up at all. And there's also a sort of implied implication in the story that it's up to the State Department of Education to stop violence in schools. That's kind of the way the story was framed. That was the unspoken implication, and it's really not their responsibility.
Let's get to it. Governor John Hickenlooper announced a compromise this week that motivated backers to pull 4 separate fracking initiatives from the November ballot. The compromise creates a committee that will bring industry and community representatives together to recommend new regulations to the state legislature. Patty, this was huge news, and it impacted a lot of different things. Let's first take a look at the impact on the idea of fracking and the controversy wraps up with that, and then we'll kind of get into the politics. What did you think of the announcement? Did you think that it was even possible for this kind of a compromise?
I think it was a surprise because most people thought when Hickenlooper gave up on the special session that we just weren't going to get anything. It was going to go all the way to the ballots. It was going to be a very ugly campaign fight. And then, of course, the fights would continue afterwards with the people trying to pull back on whatever didn't make it or push them again. It was a surprise that it did come when it did. People must be all over town visiting physical therapists right now from the arm twisting that went on. You just cannot even imagine how much behind the scenes maneuvering there was. And we're just beginning to find out exactly where everyone was on it. Polis could have gone a little further before he decided to withdraw the 2 88 and 89, the 2 he had pushed, the 2 he had funded. But by then, all the campaigns would have been geared up. We would have had all those TV stations, those nice TV stations, raking in all that money for all those commercials. And now we're going to free up, $12 million to go to spend on the GMO contest. the commission has its work cut out for them. It is not all going to be kumbaya. There are going to be plenty of fights ahead on that. And then we move to the legislative remedy, and there could still be more fights. We might still see this on a ballot at some point. But good that we don't right now have to deal with 4 measures that really don't belong in the Constitution of Colorado. We were just talking about going on our spring bear hunt to do civil disobedience on another earlier initiative that doesn't belong in the Constitution. The laws can be made without altering that.
David, just looking at the fracking side of it for right now, does this do anything to really address or mend the problem that had the both environmentalists and the industry have with fracking, from what you can see?
No, because as Governor Hickenlooper said, Colorado already has the toughest, most restrictive rules for oil and gas drilling in the entire United States. I mean, how much more can you do other than just ban the whole thing, which is what, of course, the fractivists want. I mean, there is, you look at the fanaticism of all kinds of groups on all kinds of issues, guns, abortion, gay rights, and the pro and con and all that. I think in the intensity and the vituperation, nobody matches the hardcore of the anti-fracking people. They're just morally outraged at the use of oil and gas. They have talked themselves into hysteria in thinking that if they turn on their faucet, flames are going to start coming out. Although that whole thing in that Gasland movie was demonstrated to be a hoax, but they're willingly gullible on these kinds of things. So, you have a commission of 20 expert people. Can they come up with some kind of recommendation for something? Sure, but it's going to be no more than tiny marginal changes, and that can't possibly satisfy the hardcore of the prohibitionists.
Eli, looking at that video of the different activists, I don't want to say attacking, but definitely being very angry with Jared Polis the next day, it didn't seem like these folks were suddenly going to just walk away and say, oh, well, it's all over. I'm sure we'll get everything we want. It sounds like this just, at least when it comes to the fracking issue, just got kicked to 2015 or 2016. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. This is a political solution. This is not a policy solution. The policy challenge is still out there, and it's a serious challenge. And I will say, Dave's depiction of them as sort of mirrors the ad that showed them as these, Cheeto-eating flat Earth Society people. I mean, there's an element of that. That's fair, but you can't paint all of them with that brush. These are families and property owners who have legitimate concerns. They may not have all the information, scientific information, but they have legitimate concerns about their property values, about their air quality, about the quality of their water, and so they aren't going to go away, and they aren't all a bunch of hysterical people. Now, Patty's right that amending the Constitution was not the right way to go about this. So that's a challenge, and it's something that's going to have to be addressed because the fervor that you see in Boulder County and the surrounding areas from those homeowners, it's not just limited to a small group of people. I will give the governor credit, going back to the politics for just a moment. This was something that his staff has been working on some sort of compromise for 4 or 5 months, and he's shown that he's pretty good at getting people in the room and forcing them not to leave until there's some sort of agreement. Took a long time here. I think the smartest tactical move he made was after a long time not being able to find the votes, when he said no special session, he pulled the plug on that. That really isolated Jared Polis because it enabled Hickenlooper, Mark Udall, Andrew Romanoff, everybody to come out and say, okay, we oppose these initiatives. It looked like they were going forward, and I think it really further isolated Jared Polis, and it forced Polis to start looking seriously for an exit ramp and a way to save face, and I think that's what you had at the end of the day.
Susan, there's still a lot of energy when it comes to activists behind fracking. There's still cities that have bans with it. I don't think that suddenly dissipates because there's going to be a blue ribbon committee with recommendations to the legislature. What do you think?
No, as Eli said, this just punts it into the future, and every day we wait for them to have their blue ribbon commission and then for the legislature to decide more fracking's going on, more wells are being built, more roads are being built. The whole thing keeps growing. And the fervor that you're talking about, the fervor is real. And I've seen people, and it's not a stunt, I've seen water be lit on fire 10 years ago, I've seen it 5 years ago, I've seen it this year. It's not a stunt, this stuff is real. And so if they're angry It's because there are people who are calling them flat earthers. If they're angry, it's because they weren't at the table with Hickenlooper, with Polis, and with the oil and gas companies. And what this deal does is create a commission that actually puts real people at that table, including Gwen Lackold, who is a commissioner in La Plata County, who's been dealing with homeowners' concerns on fracking since 1988, when BP, which was Amoco, started drilling 1,000 wells in La Plata County.
So now let's take a look at the political side of this, because as Eli alluded to, Governor Hickenlooper came up with kind of a rabbit out of his hat here, pulling out this compromise that no one really thought was on the horizon. Jared Polis seems to have been able to save face, at least on the political side of things. He's more welcomed in D.C. nowadays than he is in his own district. Patty, what did you think about all the intrigue behind it? People were talking about House of Cards and everything else. At the end of the day, was this a pretty deft political maneuver by Governor Hickenlooper?
Well, it was definitely a deft maneuver by him. What we really don't know yet is what made Polis finally cave. Was it because he was feeling lonely? Was it because he realized he could come back and get a bite of this apple another day? Was it influence from Washington? I mean, does he care that much about Udall? I mean, Udall certainly benefits from this because we will not have quite as heated a fracking discussion. It wasn't going to matter as much to Hickenlooper given his position, because it's not like Bob Beaupre is anti-fracking. But it wasn't just twisting the arm of Polis and everyone else behind him, the fractivists. You also had oil and gas people who were not on the side of it either, so they still had to go for the drill baby drill team and bring them on board for this commission. So we don't know ultimately what made Polis change his mind, but we'll certainly see, depending on how people behave on this commission, whether we see more ballot measures coming up, just exactly how well the deals went down.
David, as you look at it politically, who are the big winners from this compromise?
Oh, Mark Udall, who is the reason why it happened. You can tell the narrative of John Hickenlooper's charming personality and cleverness and making Jared feel lonelier and lonelier, although it seemed that the governor's persuasive ability with Jared Polis has never been particularly strong. But the way the Wall Street Journal reports it is Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, well aware of Mark Udall's troubling polling numbers in July. We know the public polls, and I suspect the internal polls are similar, said this is a guy for whom there is just zero margin of error. And if this fracking thing is on the ballot, it's going to hurt Democrats all over the state. But it's particularly, and it could cost us Mark Udall's Senate seat. And if we're going to have any chance of holding the Senate as a backstop against the House of Representatives, which is certainly going to stay Republican, we've got to keep Udall here. And so that Reid and Pelosi went to Udall and said, if you want to have any future of advancing in the House of Representatives, you better pull this thing. We don't care about the substance. We care about Mark Udall. Or if you like it otherwise, you can keep on getting reelected from Boulder and have a long time enjoying your chairmanship of an obscure subcommittee, which will have no business and you'll be the only member of.
Eli, at the end of the day, who benefited most from this compromise politically?
Mark Udall, clearly. But I think that Jared Polis, having covered him for a while and having talked to so many people around this in Democratic circles, Jared Polis doesn't care about Mark Udall, never has. And I think, Jared was ready to run for Udall's congressional seat 4 years before Udall jumped. That's not the issue. Jared Polis cares about representing his constituents. You can't just dismiss him as only in for himself. He was trying to represent his constituents, but he also cares about his own future. And I think if the Wall Street Journal report is accurate, and it certainly makes sense that Pelosi and Reid would say, if you want the D-Trip chairmanship, or if you want anything else, you better be a better team player at this point and step aside. If that was the case, it happened because of Jared Polis' concerns for his own future and not wanting to see some roadblocks there. I will say the reaction he got from the constituents at the end of the day, who were so betrayed after he pulled the initiatives, I think that there's this tendency to view everything in such an absolutist way. And if you're one of those people who wanted these things on the ballot and wanted this conversation taking place, you have to at least look at what Jared did and say, without him, we wouldn't have this commission. We wouldn't have had all these conversations, all this national media attention. We wouldn't be talking about this unsettled question of local control of oil and gas the way we are now. And so whether anything comes out of this or whether Jared goes forward to 2016 and says, you know what, that's not satisfactory, we're going to run these initiatives again, he started the conversation. I think the people in his district who wanted more should at least appreciate that he's moved the ball as far as he has.
Susan, what do you think? Will Jared Polis be able to recover from his base who feel betrayed, or at least the part of his base that feels betrayed? Will he be able to end up turning this into a win?
I think, number one, he had backed himself into such a corner with the oil and gas people, with the Democrats, and even with his own people, the gas patch people, who he didn't include at the table, that this helps him recover because it helps him save face. Because the fact is, pretty much I think it's a fact, that those ballots were going to lose, those ballot issues were going to lose. And for all his money, he doesn't have enough to beat oil and gas on those issues. And so had they lost, he would have had that on his hands. There was an assumption that those issues were bringing down Democrats like Mark Udall and other Democrats. He would have had those losses on his hands. So what it did is just back him out of a situation that you have to kind of ask, how did he get himself in the first place?
That's a good point. An element of the compromise brokered by Governor Hickenlooper was to ask the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission to drop its lawsuit against the city of Longmont over its fracking ban. The COGCC voted to drop the lawsuit unanimously this week, but Longmont city officials claim that was not what the governor promised because the GOCC legally left the possibility to refile in the future. David, again, you're a lawyer here. They mentioned in the reports about this without prejudice. What was that part of it, and is there really still a possibility, or is Longmont being just a little too sensitive?
Well, there was a good article in the Denver Post this morning explaining that. When you voluntarily dismiss a lawsuit, usually it's dismissed without prejudice, meaning, okay, this case goes away, but you can come back into court with a new case in the future. If it's dismissed with prejudice, that's like saying, we don't want to see you guys in court, plaintiffs in court in this issue, again, you're done. And the Oil and Gas Commission, I think, accurately worried that if they did dismissal with prejudice against Longmont, then that could be used to prevent them from bringing suits against other localities which have illegal, according to state law, bans on fracking. And obviously, whether it's illegal or not, that the courts will ultimately decide that. But I think the Oil and Gas Commission has a pretty plausible legal commission to say that absolute prohibitions go way too far and are preempted by state law. I think the most important thing on these local bans is they crested with Longmont, and the fact that they've been recently defeated elsewhere indicates that the facts are getting out. And people can watch Gasland or whatever else they want, but you're increasingly having the real life experience in Colorado of people say, oh yeah, there's this drilling rig going on and it's too noisy, I don't like it. But all these horror stories of, oh, you're going to get cancer and you're going to have water coming out, flames coming out of your faucet, they're not happening in Colorado.
Eli, I don't know about the other different cities that have been considering bans or have bans, but what impact does the lifting the suit on Longmont make for other cities that might be contemplating this?
I don't know that there's a huge impact there. I think the governor did that to say, look, we want this stakeholder process to go forward. And I also think they have some leverage in the fact that just this week, the second municipal fracking ban was overturned by a judge. I mean, I'm no legal expert, but it seems pretty clear that the law as written is pretty explicit that a city cannot, ban fracking when the state has a right to the oil and gas development and the mineral rights that have been leased. So I think that at this point, that just sort of pushes forward towards, puts a little more momentum behind this push for some sort of change to our laws, not the Constitution, but our laws, because that is where, if local communities are going to have more ability to expand setbacks or to zone this differently, that's where it's going to have to come. It's going to have to be written into state law. It's not going to come from, voters saying we're just going to ban this outright. And I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where cities will be allowed to completely ban oil and gas development.
Susan, did the Longmont city officials have a right to be distrustful?
to be
distrustful, not to think that because they didn't get with prejudice on the lawsuit that it might come back, even though they voted unanimously against it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a nexus between this without prejudice thing, which kind of tables everything, and the deal that was announced by Hickenlooper and Polis this week, which also kind of tables everything by forming a commission and leaving it to the legislature. So everything's on hold. And on the issue of the effect it has on other cities and this kind of copycat effect, will these cities pass these similar bans? I think there will be a chilling effect, because these suits, or the threat of these suits, it's costly for these municipalities. And the fact is, the state has a lot more money to litigate than these municipalities. And so I can't really see some local county commissioner in this kind of climate of uncertainty pushing forward with some ban.
Patty, what do you think of Longmont's reaction?
I think in this case, they overreacted because the fact is everything's tabled right now, but they're all meeting at the table. The commissioners will be talking about giving more local control. So the lawsuit can be refiled, but still the ban exists too. So Longmont did get that ban through. We'll see what happens if the local control, the changes that are made in the law that have been promised or at least been discussed as on the table, really get off that table and get into the legislature and get into our laws. But local municipalities will still have some options.
Well, let's get a quick take on this one. The Denver Sheriff's Office remained in the news this week as a report from the Denver Post reveals several disciplinary letters issued to the deputies since the start of 2013. The reports show misconduct ranging from food fights to watching YouTube videos with inmates. Meanwhile, Mayor Hancock announced that he's hiring a former FBI agent to advise the independent investigation of the department. Eli, we're running close on time, but what did you think of the developments this week?
I think if there's anybody who's a smart hire to look into that, it's Jim Davis. The guy's well respected in Colorado. I think it's unfortunate for the mayor, given that he's heading into a re-election year and suddenly all these scandals, I mean, all these, just one thing after another from the jail and the sheriff's department. I think more concerning, though, honestly, is that Jamal Hunter settlement, the $3.25 million, when the city has to pay that much to a guy who, yes, sustained some injuries, but not $3.25 million worth of injuries. You know that there is something the city is concerned about, and it may well extend between the jail and the city attorney's office if there's been sort of coordinated case fixing or, that is a concern. And that is something that I think Judge Kane, when he was talking, before he rubber stamped that settlement, that is something that I think is a serious concern, and we'll see if there's an investigation into that as well.
Susan, ColoradoIndependent.com has done some great work. You had access to that video that showed another brutality case. What's your quick take?
My quick take is, with all due respect to James Davis, he is a law enforcement functionary. He's not an expert in jails or prisons, and that he should take the lead of John Hickenlooper, who tackled the problems in the state prison systems by hiring outsiders and coming in and making real reform. Mr. Davis is not an outsider, and the problem with all of this in the Sheriff's Department and the Department of Safety and the Police Department is political. This is a political Band-Aid.
Patty, your quick take.
This just gets worse and worse. When they're not busy beating up prisoners, they are going on the computers to look up for auto parts or to look at their tablet because they're bored at work. So you've got several different layers here. Some of these things Jim Davis can clearly handle, like what does it take to be fired? What does it take to do your job there? What does it take to convince deputies not to brutalize prisoners? And I think some of that he can handle, but it's going to be a challenge.
David, finish up for us.
We have as City Auditor Gallagher pointed out, we already have in Denver the Office of the Independent Monitor, which might have been the first place to go to on that. What we can see in the track record is Mayor John Hickenlooper, Mayor Michael Hancock, and Mayor Wellington Webb, whatever their other virtues, were terrible at putting a sheriff into place who could run the jail in a fair and safe way for everybody. And so I continue to think it's time to restore to the people of Denver the right to directly elect the sheriff themselves. But food fights and YouTube videos, if they were the big problems, that would be great.
Yeah, that's certainly not the big problems, but astonishing to see. Well, our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Patty, start us off.
You know, the Denver County Fair, which is such a great celebration, got a black eye this week when you had somehow some supposedly cannabis-free candy bars being handed out to people. They just didn't need that.
David.
I guess they got mixed up the gluten-free and the cannabis-free or something. The CIA for illegally spying on the United States senators who were supposed to be supervising the CIA. Either the CIA director says he didn't know, and Obama says he's got full confidence in the CIA director. If President Obama is telling the truth, he has poor judgment.
Eli.
Karl Rove, his latest ad in the state features a woman from Castle Rock saying that Obamacare forced her to go back to work. Couldn't be further from the truth. She told me herself yesterday that it wasn't Obamacare, it was just the fact that they need to make more money. Her husband has a pre-existing condition. I mean, it goes on and on. So the blurring of the truth on that is unfortunate, and Karl Rove.
Susan.
The U.S. government, which is giving treatment, medicine, drugs to U.S. missionaries in West Africa that seem to be working, and thousands of people are dying of Ebola without access to those drugs.
Say something nice, quickly.
The Ballpark neighborhood, which has had a tough summer, has a big event on Wednesday night, so get out there and enjoy it.
David.
The 40th anniversary of the resignation of Richard Nixon, that was a time when the system worked to force out of office an anti-constitutional president who perverted the CIA and attempted to pervert the IRS against his political opponents.
My friend and former colleague Ron Zappolo back in the booth last night doing play-by-play for the Broncos game. I know he's really happy at the mic doing that stuff, and I hope there's more of that in store for him.
Hear, hear.
Last week, a man was hit by a motorcycle, and he died from it. He was an 88-year-old man who was a friend of mine and a longtime newspaper man, Whitey Wattsman, who I think was one of the best, most thoughtful consumers of the news we have here in Denver and Colorado.
Well, that is all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. For our viewers watching our live stream on our website right now, stay tuned for a special behind-the-scenes segment. And for our broadcast viewers, we'll see you next week. And don't forget to check out our web-exclusive CIO post-game content at cpt12.org every Friday afternoon. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.
My name is Sarah Newberry, and I am the floor director here for Colorado Inside Out and Colorado Public 12. And what I mainly do is I am the go-between the control room and the talent. So I am listening in on my headset, and they are giving me direction on when to tell the talent to stand by, whether or not I need them to read through their script, whether or not they need to look at a certain camera. They tell me, and then I will go ahead and relay that onto the talent.
Here we go. Studio, are you ready?
Yes, sir. We're ready on the floor. So one of the responsibilities of the floor director is making sure everything on the floor is in its place and ready to go for the television show that we're going to take. So that includes making sure set pieces are correctly placed on the floor, lighting is in the correct place, and shooting the correct places. Set pieces, which tables and chairs, they are in not only in alignment with the camera, but in alignment with the set pieces behind them. Another one of the things I like to do, and it is part of the floor director's job, is to make sure all of the talent is properly mic'd and ready to go, what we call camera ready. So if they need a little makeup, they have water available to take a sip, they have the correct script in front of them, and they're seated in the correct chair. Another one of the things that we want to do is we want to make sure everyone is looking good for television. My motto is if they don't look good, I don't look good. And my name's on the credits, so I want to make sure everybody on set is looking their best. So I make sure everybody's hair is set in case they have a couple of flyaways, get those down. Everyone has a tendency to look a little shiny on TV, so we always have a little bit of powder, and I have it marked for this is my lightest powder. So just have a little powder handy, knock down some of the shine, and just make sure overall that everybody looks and feels their best so that they can present themselves great on TV, which makes for a great story, which makes for a great show. So that when the all-important time comes and the director is in my ear saying,
Floor director ready for mic and cue.
stand by, we're going to start in 5, 4, 3, and I get them going. So I'll see you on the next episode of Colorado Inside Out.
I have no idea. Why do elephants paint their toenails red?
To hide in cherry trees. No, wait, no, I know it. Okay. No, wait. Have you ever seen an elephant in a cherry tree?
I have not.
Apparently it's because you never see one.